And I think we are live. I like to do a little wee check here because I'm so professional. Let's just have a look here. Yes, we're live, and I'm really. Oh, we've got the sound of a fly now, but let's not kill the fly. I'm really stoked to have as my guest today Simon Sweetman. Welcome, Simon.
G'day, it's nice to be here, wherever I am. I'm where I've always been. I'm in my house, but it's nice to meet you. And you know what a come down for you. So Richard Hadley, Judith Collins, and then just any old twit that's in your Facebook feed.
No, I'm a really massive fan of yours, and I've sort of come late to the party on the whole Simon Sweetman thing, because I think it was I think it's been kind of cool if you're into Simon Sweetman. But I'm just a massive fan, and for people who are watching, I'll tell you a little bit about Simon fairly shortly if you don't know who he is. But he's a Facebook pal of mine, and I've followed his stuff, and I've never met him before. We've never met. This is the first time we've even done the FaceTime thing. And but we kind of encourage each other, not in a cheesy kind of way, not like, oh my God, that last post was amazing. But just like every 5 minutes, but just occasionally, when we like something that the other one is doing, we'll send them a message, and we've struck up quite a good friendship, actually, because we can both spot bullshit artists a mile away, and when I get the odd compliment from Simon, I'm like, fuck yeah, I nailed that. so it's a really cool friendship that we're developing.
Everything you said is correct in terms of the sort of friendship encouragement aspect. It's nice to meet people that I guess we're doing similar things in some ways. In terms of the trying to connect with people, share words, interview people, that sort of stuff. There's and some similar kind of stuff in our backgrounds. Yeah.
Do you know what? I actually want to start with the poetry, if that's okay. Because if you're unaware of what Simon does, he's a bloody talented guy. He does everything. He's a poet. He's a podcaster. He's a music reviewer. He does a lot, but I thought if it was okay, I would start with a poem from a new poet that I discovered and just get your thoughts on this.
Is it Kelvin Davis? He was sort of newly discovered this weekend, just been, and I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what the overall response was, but I'm getting notes of fucking awful from most people I speak to.
You know what? I thought that I thought that it was terrible, basically, and I thought what made it really amusing is that on 3 anyway, they started playing it. And they cut away. And then they came back and he was still going. I wonder if that's how most New Zealanders actually view poetry, that it's all got to rhyme like that.
Yeah, well, I don't know about most, but there's barriers of entry to things like poetry. Yeah, definitely, and it's one of those things, isn't it? It was sort of taught at school years ago in a really archaic way, and I think that scared a lot of people off from it. Yep.
I love this poem anyway, from a new poet that I discovered the other day, and hopefully he won't mind me reading it. Music is wonderful. You can't touch music, but it can touch you like a ghost.
It's pretty cool, that, isn't it?
I really like it.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah. I was pretty. I mean, you know what it's like to be a proud dad, right? So,
yeah. So that is from Simon's son, Oscar. And I just thought,
and he'll be 9 in a couple of weeks, so he's 8.
Yeah, and I just thought, wow, man, that's pretty good.
It's pretty cool, but we're experiencing some sort of expectation management issues because he's met my publisher and basically told her that his book will be the next thing that she works on.
I'm sure it will be.
And he thinks so. So it's great to kind of push that stuff, and we live in a world now, in a time now where things like that can happen, and he's got the publisher's ear, so he's got a head start. But I think he thinks it's all happening next week. So we're just trying to work on the crushing reality that it might just be that you have a couple of poems that I share on Facebook, and some people like yourself quite like, and that might be all it is for a while. But I'm pretty stoked that he's got interested in it, and it's a direct response of me doing my book and doing my poems and putting them up on YouTube and stuff. He's got very interested in that, which is cool, and it's all been part of him developing his own reading as much as his writing. So it's pretty exciting.
Tell me about the book, your second book.
Yeah, so it's my first book of poems. It's my second book. It's called The Death of Music Journalism, and it is I don't know. I didn't really think I was going to do a book of poems for quite some time, and then it became a reality, and I got very excited about it. I've always written poems. I've actually written poetry for longer than I've ever written music reviews, and I guess I've just been working on developing my voice as a poet, and breaking down those barriers of entry. I think, like, I love a lot of poetry. I particularly love the poetry that I don't quite understand as a reader, things that baffle me, and I have to read them several times, and they're beguiling, but I'm not very good at doing that myself. So my poetry, I think, is really just stories, and I think I call them poets to piss off poems to piss off some of the serious poets.
Yes, a good example of that is the poem that you wrote about Sam Hunt.
Oh yeah.
Which I really love. Is there any chance of you just quickly bringing that up? Can you find that quickly in your book and read that to us?
Is that
okay? I really love that. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that one, because it's absolutely the most recent poem in terms of, I wouldn't say it was written specifically for the book, but the book was already getting laid out, had already been selected when I wrote this poem, and then I sort of had to ask if it could be included. So I've got this picture of Sam Hunt that's in the book.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
And that's a photo that I took 20 years ago. So I look at that photo most days, and so I wrote this poem about it. It's called, do you want me to read it?
Yes, please. It'd be really great. Yeah, okay.
It's called I Took a Photo of Sam Hunt in Upper Hutt 20 years ago. I have a photograph of Sam Hunt. I took it, looking up at him from the floor, my jaw down by my camera, and me in awe of it all. It was about 20 years ago, and I had been reading his words for at least 10 years then. I'd met him briefly outside the pub in Hastings, where he was looking to cadge a fag after reciting Baxter and quoting lines from Dylan, Lou Reed, and Keith Richards. I told him in nervous schoolboy rising voice that I loved Lou Reed and knew the New York album he'd referenced, my favourite. I hadn't had to tell him I snuck into the pub underage, and when he asked me for a durry, I was almost embarrassed to be a healthy non-smoker. He signed my book, Simon, from one Lou Reed man to another, Sam, and I could only ever read it in his voice, like a poem only he might ever write. I loaned that book out to someone many years ago, never got it back. A year after taking this photograph of Sam shaking the poems from his shoulders, I was his opening act. Nervously, I read a poem about history and opinion being both 7-letter words, but only one fits correctly into the crossword. And this was inspired by the crosswords me and my wife had been having, as she focused on completing the newspaper puzzle. And I had become Simon Sweetman, going on about how Elvis really was the best, the greatest, the first, the one. After my set, there was a note at the bar to join Sam in his room, and I did. He had a bottle of wine he wanted to share, said he didn't like hanging in the bar for too long during other people reading because he'd get bugged by the punters, and it wasn't fair to him or the person on stage or the others in the pub there to listen. We drank the wine, and he told me he had seen a couple of my poems, and I'd done a good job, and he liked very much the one about the crossword. I told him far too quickly that he could have it and shuffled through the pages to hand him that poem. He nodded, and several seconds later he declared, all right. He stood in the stovepipes and then opened a little vintage suitcase, mumbling as he showed me his kid's school photo. He carried it in the case with him. It was the whole class photo covered in Glad wrap, and his son's 5-year-old face was circled in red marker. He said something like, well, you've given me some of your very best words. I like to give you some good words too. He shuffled through typed pages and then paused to look at one. Then loudly said, yeah, I like to give you some Wordsworth, as he handed me a cover poem, which made total sense, since the sum worth of his words is forever held in his head. I kept that Wordsworth poem in a folder for years, then lost it or binned it or loaned it out like the signed book, never to return. I've got the photograph still. I look at it most days. So there you go.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so. Yeah. Do you find it easy to write? Like, does it just come naturally to you, or like do you find when you're writing that, you know, obviously some stuff just comes to you bang like that, and you just pours out of you. But do you sometimes find that you're just working on and you're having to craft it and just keep chiseling away, or do you just go at the end of the day, I know what I want to say, that's that, and I move on?
I would describe myself as a geyser. I am just bursting the shit out. I'm just. I've got a literary equivalent of a plumbing problem. This shit just pours from me, and you know, what I've learned to do is embrace that, and you know, you might look at them afterwards and tweak a few things and fix a few things, but the ideas pretty much just come, and obviously many of them are terrible, and I just have decided to sort of scrapbook it, to just keep everything, and so sometimes they get reworked and reworded and worked on, and other times it's publish and be damned, because that's the kind of world I've found myself in with newspaper writing and blogging. So it's publish and be damned, and then revisit and rework if you want to. So if that Sam Hunt poem that came out fully formed just like that, I'm happy with that. But if I wasn't, I probably would have just published it and then written another poem about Sam Hunt. You know what I realized?
Right.
Yeah, what I realized a while ago is there are no rules to this stuff. Like, why not have 5 poems about? I mean, in the book there are 2 poems that directly not only reference the Beatles but have the Beatles in the title, and there are a couple of poems about Bob Dylan. There's a couple of poems that mention Prince and Roy Orbison. You know, why do you just have to have one definitive poem about a person or about a subject or a thing? You can just revisit it. So the short answer to your question is I write a lot, and I usually find it quite easy to get words out. Being pleased with it is, of course, another thing altogether.
I love your writing because there are certain things that certain catchphrases. No, they're not catchphrases at all. What am I saying? There's certain lines that I just go, shit, that is. How the hell did that come out? But at the other end of the spectrum, I don't know if these are 2 different poems, but I really love this. There's reference to your wife, Katie, and you say, you could probably quite easily live without me, but you'd never tell me. I just think that's so beautiful. And also, and I don't know if it's in the same poem, you talk about Oscar turning 2 and it being the 3rd best day in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
They are 2 different poems, but they are essentially, they are. They're 2 different poems. They're both in the book, and they are really, they're on the same theme, of course, aren't they? Like, you know, there's one that I thought you might like to, I don't know if you know it, but there's one that I would like to read for you that's a shorter poem, because I thought you would identify with this very much. Now I just need to find it in my contents page, but it is. I'm just going to flick through and find it. I thought of you because you are a loving father, and you know what it's like to be very proud of your kids and to enjoy the the moments that you get. And you are also someone, and I don't think I am bursting out a little nugget here that you haven't divulged, but you are someone who has contemplated, well, we all do this, but you are someone who has had to contemplate your own mortality. Yes. And so I want to read this for you because I think you'll identify with it. It's called Weekend Fun. Saturday morning, the kid in bed. I'm telling stories of the things I did when I was his age, silly stuff that he'll laugh at and repeat, and then he'll ask me to repeat it so he can get the exact wording and copy my voice. Saturday afternoon, we're watching a film, pause, rewind, watch the funny bit again and again and again, and then wait for more funny bits, expectantly, hopeful. Saturday night, it's time for bed. A great day of laughs, no stress, only fun. One more long cuddle. His legs and body seem to almost run the length of mine. He'll be asleep soon, and I can worry only then about all of the time we might never have.
Oh, wow. Mate, that's just so good. That's so beautiful. I really love that.
Thank you. That's one of the ones my publisher told me was a bit glib. And I said, get fucked.
It's my fucking book.
I said, get fucked, I like it. Pretty much. Yeah. And then she said, I'm never going to use the word glib again. And, she probably wasn't wrong. But I just wanted to have some poems in there that were just, well, they're all direct speak. They're all just me speaking in my voice, how I would speak, things I think and things I say. And that's what I've sort of worked on A, it's come naturally, and B, I've worked on embracing it, I suppose, and putting it on the page. But yeah, I mean, for all the stories in the book about music journalism and the death of it and my part in that, or how it's happened to me, there's a lot of stuff in this book about my family, about me and being connected to family. There's lots of stuff about, and what I found really interesting when the book came out was I didn't really know it until I saw the pages all in a row and bound in a book. Was there's so much stuff in there about my dad, and there's so much stuff in there about my son, and this interesting kind of lineage of how, and the differences between how me and my dad relate to each other and how me and my son relate to each other. And there's even a couple of poems mentioning my dad's father. I don't think there are any that really talk about my maternal grandfather, who I had a really good relationship with. But it's interesting, this sort of, I didn't plan it, but there's this legacy, this line of Sweetman men that I'm referencing in these poems. So yeah.
Isn't there, where did I see, I don't know if it's from your book or if it's I saw it somewhere else. There's a poem where I think your father was going to get into a fight and you decided to sort of man up. And what's that? I love that. What is that?
That's in the book too. That's
Can you read that? Are you able to find that?
Yeah,
I really love that. Something that I want to.
It's about going to an Eric Clapton concert. It's called.
I love that.
Me and my dad have been to 2 Eric Clapton concerts, and we went to the first one in 1990, and it was the very first Eric Clapton concert I ever went to. I was a massive fan, and one of my favourite things about doing the podcast is that a couple of years ago I did a podcast with Midge Marsden, who was the opening act.
Great guy.
Yeah, great guy, and who I've seen heaps, and it was my first time properly meeting him, but we've had some really nice chats over the years. But it was so cool to be able to speak to him, because I was 13 at my first international concert, and as good as Midge and his band was, I thought that his band, I was able to actually say to him, I thought your band was incredible. And I remember leaning over to my dad and going, imagine how good this band is going to sound when Eric Clapton comes out and plays with them. Like, I hadn't really worked out that he would bring his own band, and that, no offense to Midge and his crew, but that they would actually be better. And then they turned the stage around and made everything bigger and louder and better. And these world-class musicians came out. And I watched, people like Nathan East, who played on, has played on about 3,000 records, all the Michael Jackson records and stuff. Anyway, it was amazing. And so a few years later, a little bit jaded and having gone to so many concerts and mostly been as a reviewer, I go to the Mission concert in Hawke's Bay with my dad and my mum to see Eric Clapton. And I've completely fallen out of love with Eric Clapton's music. I couldn't give a shit about him now. I find him very boring. But he was formative for me at the crucial time. So this poem is really, about my dad, and it's also about those pesky Hawke's Bay Mission concert audiences. So it's called that second Eric Clapton concert I went to. We were at an Eric Clapton concert, i.e. a white room. None more white when it comes to the blues. And there was a bit of argy-bargy going on. Some dude was pushing another dude, and then my dad got all up in the grill of someone, chest puffed out, and I'd never seen that before, so I had to join in too. I was worried about the old man, didn't want to see him go down like that. Sconed in the face, clocked while I was slow hand, was playing Wonderful Tonight. So next thing, I'm up in the face of the guy too. Don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm there to protect the old man. to see if I can let my size suggest I might have packed a fight. But I've never thrown a punch, and by any look at me, I'm far better at packing a lunch. Anyway, the gig was a fucking blinder, and how the hell did that happen? Eric Clapton gave it all away in about 1970 or at least 72. He phoned it in for years, fucking years, absolutely years. Got good again for a bit around about 1990. See, that's when I went and saw him, which was the first time me and the old man found ourselves at an Eric Clapton show. But that was nearly 20. This was nearly 20 years on from then. And old Slowhand was very nearly old Sock and most certainly old Hat. And then, when anyone least expected it, a vital show, 5 songs from the bloody Layla album, his final triumph. So this was a good save, and I put it down to the clean shave, no neck beard, just a few cum-faced guitar solos. And he was the third best acts on stage that night. Eric Trucks and Doyle Bramall owned the show, just like my dad reckons he owned the guy who was trying to own the guy over some white blues matter, some drunken dumb matter. And I stepped up because I thought I'd give misguided arrogance a go. And it's a shame to now place this as any kind of boast, but I play the elegant bluff like it's my own final passage from Layla. Further on up the road, as the people filed out from the clinic, they were sad not to have heard Tears in Heaven. These heathen cunt losers, these jerks, these sopping, sodden fucks. My dad was basically shadowboxing, punch drunk, owning the streets, planning a song in his head, his own blues swimming in the red. So there you go. There's the Eric Clapton.
Love it. Yeah. Owning the streets. Owning the streets. I just love that. Man.
Yeah, if you've ever had the displeasure of going to a concert in Hawke's Bay at the Mission, you just see these people drunk with golf carts. They take golf carts full of piss. You know, they take their golf trolleys and they load up 3 or 4 chili bins with cable ties. And the thing that was in my head when I wrote this was my dad for years owned a car yard, and he said some guy came up and said something to him about, you go to the Mission concert? And he said, yes. And he said, what about you? And the guy said to him, I go every year. I don't care who's playing. They could put a guy on stage riding a fucking lawnmower and I'd still go. And I think that's so brilliant. And, you know, I love Hawke's Bay. I love how weird and mad that place is. And that to me just sums up the Hawke's Bay Mission concert experience.
I love that so much. That's so funny. Now, can you hold up the book for us, just so we can get a good look at it? And actually, there's a story behind the cover as well. There's a friend, your friend, who you've probably known well since you were like little kid. I think you even went to kindergarten together, didn't you?
Yeah. You've got a good memory for these. You've got a good memory for these little factoids and nuggets. Yep.
So talk us through this, because I think this is a lovely story in itself about the cover.
Well, it is a lovely story. It's a lovely story about how when you've known someone long enough, no matter how good they are at their craft, you can basically ask them to do something for you for free. So because Matthew Cooper is an amazing artist, and maybe some people listening to this and watching this will know his work. He's a prolific artist, and he's on Facebook and Instagram, and he's well worth checking out. He's a New Zealander, but he lives in Las Vegas, and he's done extraordinary work for years. And yes, I've known him since we were both, he's a month older than me, and we've known each other since we were 4.
Wow.
We went right through kindergarten, primary school, intermediate, high school, and then we went to different universities. But I was in Wellington, he was in Wanganui. He would come down for some weekends and visit, and then he moved here to Wellington for many years. And you know, we played hockey together at school. We were into sport, and we love music, and we love a lot of the same music, and we have similar sort of senses of humour, and we're very passionate about art and books and movies and music and all the important things, you know, all the important things that you share with your very best friends. So I'm a huge fan of his work. And when the book became a reality, I really had it in mind straight away. I'd love to have a front cover by Matthew Cooper, whose work I admire, and who I guess I've written a couple of essays for a couple of catalogues that he's done, and we have talked about the idea that one day we might collaborate on something. We weren't really sure what it would be, whether it would be a children's book or whether it would be, you know, what it would be, a graphic novel. I don't know. And there's just been a bit of chat about that. So it was during the lockdown, and my publisher said, we're going to need to get a cover. Covers aren't cheap. We don't have a lot of budget for a cover. if you can get a really cool image or you know someone. And I said, leave it with me. And I messaged Matt and we had a chat and I shared some ideas with him about what I wanted. And he actually drew a sketch that is remarkably similar to the finished product while we were sitting having a Zoom chat. And a couple of things needed to change. The publisher actually requested that my dog be put in the picture, who wasn't in there originally. So Bowie the dog got added to the front cover. I also thought this was kind of funny, and I'm going to sound like an asshole here, but I had this image that was where the microphone is. I had this image.
Wasn't it a rabbit hanging or something? No.
I had a set of headphones like these, like we're both wearing. Hanging down with the cord wrapped around them like a noose, which I thought was funny.
That's right.
Because it played into the death of music journalism. But I'm, in the words of the great band Tism, I might be a cunt, but I'm not a fucking cunt. So I realized that actually that could be very triggering to people. The idea that it is a noose that it represents.
Yeah.
So we replaced it with the trusty old Frank Sinatra style / wrestling ring, boxing ring microphone. But Matt drew this up, painted it. The book that I'm holding is my first book on song, which is a book of music. I
didn't know that. That's clever.
So that was Matt's idea. I didn't even have to prompt him on that.
That's very clever.
Yeah, so he just came up with that, which is cool. The other funny thing was he said, "Who do you want on your T-shirt?" Because he'd just drawn a blank T-shirt, and I said, "Oh, well, you might as well put Bukowski on there. Like, why not put Charles Bukowski on there? It's kind of addressing the elephant in the room that way. If anyone says, oh, these poems are kind of Bukowski rip-offs, which I don't really think they are, but no one can really say that now because it's literally like heart on sleeve and his head on my chest." And then I thought, well, I don't actually have a T-shirt like that. So for the book launch, I got a guy to draw a picture of that, and I've now got a Bukowski T-shirt that looks like that. So I actually
did that. Yeah, it's very cool.
So did that in reverse order. Just thought that was kind of a funny gimmick to stand up at the book launch and have the actual T-shirt from the front cover. So so Matt did this for me for no cost and actually sent me the original painting, which I've now framed and have hanging on the wall. And I'm about to send him obviously a copy of the book, and I look forward to seeing him one day when he's allowed back in the country with all the madness that's going on. He seems pretty safe and secure where he is, and as much as you can be living in that country at the moment. But man, what a cool thing. One of my and what I've been able to say to people that I've gone to school with and university with that have seen that I've got a book. They might not like poetry. They might not even like my poems, but this is a really cheap way to get yourself a Matthew Cooper artwork. You could buy this book because his prices are quite high now, deservedly. But this is the cheapest Matthew Cooper you can get. This is only $25. You can go into any bookstore and buy this for $25. If they don't have it, they'll order it for you. You can go to the Cooper Press website and say, I want a Matthew Cooper artwork. I don't mind if it comes with 100 pages of quite funny and a little bit sad poetry from some asshole music reviewer. I think, why not?
But $25 for Matthew Cooper.
That's a bargain.
That's value. Value right there. So where do people get the book? This is where. So can they get it online as well, or where do they get it?
Well, I mean, we love encouraging people to go into bookstores because while they still exist, and I think they're actually going very strongly in 2020 bookstores.
They are.
The pandemic has meant a nice upsurge for secondhand books. People sort of perceive that to be, obviously people stay at home and read, and people perceive the idea of a secondhand bookstore to obviously be better value than a brand new bookstore. So I know secondhand bookstores have had a little bit of a surge, and bookstores in general have. So Unity Books in Wellington helped launch the book. They have stock. I imagine Unity Books in Auckland have it. You can go into any bookstore and ask for it because they can get it if they don't have it in stock. I know Wardini's and Havelock North have had it. I think they've sold out. They'll probably get it again. And yes, if you go to the Cuba Press website, you can order it from the website. If you live in the sticks and don't get to bookstores, or if you just do your shopping online, that's also fine. They will send it to you for the same price. But yeah, we're trying to suggest that you go into a bookstore and
ask. Good on you. Well, I can't recall the name. It's really annoying me now, but these 3 young women started a bookstore from scratch, basically through COVID.
Right. Yeah. There's been a bit of that. Like there's a bookstore in Wellington that's just open called Good Books, and that's just opened, and that basically hatched as a plan during lockdown. There's another store
really
opening. Yeah, there's a store opening, and I believe Greytown is about to get its first proper bookstore, which, its first one in a while anyway, which is cool because it's a great little town full of lots of arts and culture, and yeah.
Don't you think there's something just really nice about having, physical, books rather than ebooks, or and same with CDs, and people our age are now going back to vinyl and stuff like that. I really think it's funny because I had this conversation with my eldest boy Ben, who he's like you. His life is music. He just lives and breathes music. It's everywhere he goes. And I said, don't you miss the idea of having a collection in your room, all the stuff? And he goes, no, what are you talking about? I just have it on my Spotify. What are you going on about there? That's really weird. He just has he just doesn't think it's important. But I think it's kind of sad that they don't.
I mean, it is. Well, we think it is because we grew up with it, and
we're old.
And are drawn back to it. I mean, I've sold my almost entire CD collection and given it away and traded it in for records and to pay bills, and because I'm sick of it, and then I've started buying them again. It's a sickness, it's a disease, as much as anything. But I listen to a lot of stuff online. I read a lot of stuff on Kindles. I go to I go to obviously read a lot of stuff online. But I go to the library. I buy books. I love books. And when Mary, who published the book, I said this in my launch speech. I think a book really came about because last Christmas she invited me to a reading that a bunch of Cuba Press poets were doing, and she put me on the bill even though I wasn't technically a Cuba Press poet, and she sort of announced me as their next poet, which was very kind and very nice. And then I proceeded to get up there with these A4 sheets of typed out poems, and they fell everywhere, and I lost the back half of the poem, and I had to basically just go, oh yeah, sorry, I've lost that, I'll just start another one. And she basically sort of said at the end, I think you'd really benefit from having a book, like if nothing else,
to keep the shit together.
Because she basically spotted me as the profoundly unorganized person I am that does everything off the top of my head, and went, I think we'll get you a book and then you can have your poems in it. And it is cool. And I do think poetry is definitely, I share a lot of my poems online, and it's been really interesting doing that, and I like doing that. But poetry, the book is the medium for poetry. Like, poetry does exist on a page. It's great to take it off the page and perform it and read it and share it. But poetry just, I grew up buying, and I continue to buy volumes and volumes of poetry. I want to hold up another book. This is one I just got. She is amazing. So, there you go. Like, let's give a shout out to. She does not need the shout out because she's incredible. But you go and you get poetry books and you have them and you read them again and again and again. And this one turned up in the mail the other day. This Australian poet, and I haven't read anything as good as this ever, and I didn't know about it until it turned up in the mail, and it's now one of my absolute favorite books. But would I have had that experience if I'd read his stuff online? Possibly not. So I definitely think the book is absolutely crucial for the art form or the medium of poetry.
Hey, when did you start Off the Tracks? Off the Tracks.
Yeah. So Off the Tracks is my website, and that started at the end of 2012.
So is that when you started reviewing music for the first time, or had you always done that?
No. I started reviewing music properly, I guess. Well, some people are waiting for me to start doing it properly. I started putting my name to music reviews in about the year 2000. And so from about, I think like I did some student stuff and some local community rag stuff in the late 90s. And then in about 2001, I started writing for what was called the Evening Post. Wellington used to have two newspapers, the Dominion in the morning and the Evening Post was the afternoon edition. And then so I wrote for the Evening Post as just a freelancer, as just a guy who bugged them. I basically told them, I don't think your music reviewers are very good. I think I could do a better job. And that's how I got the job. They basically, to shut me up, they basically gave me a whole bunch of CDs and said, these are shit. No one likes these CDs. Things like Kylie Minogue remix albums and stuff. You say something about them and we'll see if you've got you can get a job at the end of it. And so I built up from doing all the crap work, turning up to review the gigs no one else wanted to see, to eventually being reliable, proving myself reliable and getting to do the stuff I actually wanted to do. So I wrote for the Dominion, when they turned into the Dominion Post, I wrote for them for years. And then, bits and pieces came up. I was a CD reviewer on the Good Morning TV show for a few years. That was in the mid 2000s. And then I started doing this blog on the Stuff website, which was actually, I called it Blog on the Tracks. So that's where Off the Tracks came from. So I was doing Blog on the Tracks, which is obviously a reference to the Bob Dylan album Blood on the Tracks. And I wrote about music every day for Stuff from late 2007 until about 2016, I think, 2015, 16. And somewhere in the middle of that, there were a lot of people asking for reviews, and I was writing these blog pieces, which sometimes reviewed an album, but more often than not, I was reviewing my own record collection and sharing memories, like some of the poems of concerts I've been to and stuff. So, yeah, I kind of thought, I'll start Off the Tracks as a review site. So that's how it started. So I had Blog on the Tracks going and Off the Tracks going, and Off the Tracks was where you went for album reviews, gig reviews, book reviews, film reviews, and then occasionally I'd write up an interview for it. And then I don't know how it happened, but basically I'd always been writing the poetry, and I think at some point I just sort of thought, oh well, it's content. I'll start putting up poems that reference music, and I'll see if I get any traction. And I really didn't. I don't think people wanted them at all. But that didn't bother me, because it's like, well, I'm not getting paid for this and no one's having to pay for it. I'll just keep doing it, and it'll just be our little secret. You people that come here for music reviews can just deal with the fact that I'm going to publish a poem every now and then, and we won't speak of it, but it'll just happen. And that's sort of what happened. And then I thought, well, I'll just share a few more poems. They don't have to be about music. And so that was sort of me introducing my poems to the world, which I'd actually written for years, right through high school. And then Off the Tracks has been the thing I've really done ever since. I've just carried on doing that, and the poems appear there. And then many years into being a Facebooker, I decided, actually, I'll just share a poem each day on Facebook. I'll just make it my status, and we'll see what happens. And obviously they got much more engagement that way than they did just directly on the website. People could comment, people could tell me they thought they were shit, which they still do, but often they don't.
How do you take criticism? How do you take criticism? Are you sensitive?
No, not really. I mean, people are lying if they say that they love being. No one loves being ripped to shreds. No one. No one puts anything out in the world thinking, oh, maybe someone will hate this. No one does.
Yeah.
No one does that. We all want our stuff to be, if not loved and enjoyed, we want it to be. I'll settle for tolerated, but we want it to be viewed in some way, and we want to connect with people, I think, in some way. So, but I would be the world's biggest hypocrite if I got angry about negative reviews, because I've given some fucking pearlers to people, and I'm very unapologetic about that, because I grew up reading the music press and loving how brutal some of it was, but loving how informed it was and how funny it was. And to this day, I don't go back and read old reviews of mine, but the ones that I'm challenged on the most, a lot of times I think there's a lot of humor in them, and they're actually just, they're supposed to be engaging to read. I was writing for years. I was writing the next day's fish and chip paper. So you want it to last for the moment while it can. And if you someone quoted a line and shit, when I said this, it seemed to go just fine. And saying it now will probably get me cancelled. But, me getting cancelled is like, well, come for my secondhand DVDs that you see behind me. There's nothing else I have to give. So you're welcome to them.
Go for
it. About 10 years ago or so, I described Madonna as the world's oldest living rotisserie chicken because she was in a leotard doing this video and it looked sort of out of place to me. And now if I said that in a review now, I'd be I'd be the one getting grilled, not her. But it made sense at the time and it was funny, and I didn't mean it as the obvious thing to say is, why didn't you say that about a man? Well, I personally haven't seen a man perform that way, but certainly I did call Donny Osmond. I did refer to Donny Osmond as having a turkey neck, and
my perception of you has always been that you're a feminist. That's how I would very close to it.
I'm learning all the time, and I'm hoping. And I wouldn't say that I was hanging out for the day that someone described me as a feminist, but I feel pretty honoured, right? I feel pretty honoured right now that in your mind I'm passing as one. I'm learning. I'm learning, and I think, why wouldn't we all be feminists? And I'm just trying to correct the things that I've done wrong without seeming like too much of a hypocrite. And just learning on the job.
Well, I mean, I think people, my opinion anyway, very much misconstrue what a feminist is. In my view, a feminist is someone that simply believes that, we should all be treated equally. Like a woman. That's basically how I see it. And I'm sure that I've looked up, because I've been curious, I've looked up the definition before, and that's pretty much it. A male and a female should be treated the same, equally. That's a feminist.
And if there's any idea for anyone that extra energy is being put in to elevate women, anyone that's not a man, that's because a balance needs to be addressed. So yes, it's all in the aim of equality and level pegging, level footing. But we're so far behind that an extra energy and an extra focus on it needs to happen for sadly quite a long time. And any time where you sort of stop and go, oh, things are so much better than they were in any way at all, it might be true, but it doesn't mean that a problem is at all fixed or resolved. Because
quite frankly, and we probably shouldn't go down this track for too long, but like I look at the US and I go, like they are going backwards when it comes to equal rights and how women should be treated. Just don't get me started. I just can't fucking stand that guy. I really can't. Anyway,
I saw Henry Rollins. I've seen Henry Rollins speak several times. He's one of my heroes, I think. What I've come to admire in Henry Rollins is his commitment to what he does, is the main thing. And I've seen him speak a few times, and I think it was in about 2014 that he was maybe last here, and he said then, 2013-14, he just used the phrase, America is broken. America is broken, and it is going to take a long time for it to fix. And he could never have predicted then how much worse it was going to get. So yeah, we don't need to talk about that, and we shouldn't. I mean, I was going to say we shouldn't be two white guys sitting on screens talking about how important feminism is, but actually, it's pretty cool. I remember interviewing. I remember interviewing Gayleen Preston a couple of years ago and talking to her about that, and she, and saying like, what is the correct thing to be doing here? Because you want to be in support, but you can't own as a man, you can't own the conversation. And she sort of said she used this phrase, you just get in your walker and you paddle up beside us, and that's how you show your support. And I love that. Yeah, she said you're going in the same direction. You're just in your separate walker and you're part of our fleet, and you just follow along. And I've thought about that a lot. It was probably 3 years ago that I interviewed her, and I've thought about that a lot. I mean, he's an amazing person. There was so much from that to take. but that in particular I think about often. I think, yeah, you know, that's how we need to see ourselves as. So in the context of this conversation that you and I are having, this is absolutely fine. We're not solving anything, and we're not speaking over anyone. So we're just riffing and having a chat. But you know, we need to be conscious of the fact that when someone else enters this chat that has more to say, that we don't become the mansplainers that dominate.
Yeah, very, very, very true. Hey, another sort of reason that I think we've become good mates is that when you post stuff which isn't related to music or poetry or anything, just random shit, I just go, fuck, that's brilliant. I just go, fuck, that is so funny. And now I get to a stage where I see something, go, shit, I've got to share this with Simon. Oh no, he's posted the bloody thing. Okay, great. But I'm sure it was you the other day that posted this thing as cartoon of a guy, two people on an island, and one person's got the 10 albums.
Oh yeah.
Was that you? And hey, maybe this wasn't such a great idea, just bringing the 10 albums and the wife looking like, you fucking idiot. But just on from that, maybe closing. I know it's really difficult. I'm not going to ask you for your favorite artist because I know that that's unfair. But let's talk about some of those albums that would be on the island with you. And I know it'll be all over the show. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be your absolute favorite. I'm not asking for that. But just give me a few that would be on there.
Then I said, you know, back when that used to be a sort of consideration, the idea of Desert Island Discs, I always thought that the number one for me was John Coltrane's album, I Love Supreme. That is the absolute number one album that I would want to be stuck with. And number two would be DJ Shadow's Introducing, because, and they're really similar albums to me. They come from completely different walks of life, but they do the same sort of thing. They are albums that are essentially instrumental, and they say so much without actually using words. And for me, they both just blew my mind. They are the classic examples of, I was already into jazz when I heard John Coltrane's I Love Supreme, but I heard it at such a formative age. I'd never heard jazz like that. And obviously it's actually pretty controlled and pretty safe compared to how wild jazz gets. But there's also this beautiful spiritual element to it. I think I'm only just learning to be a spiritual person. I'm certainly not a religious person, but I respect. I've gone from the angry atheist agnostic practice of condemning religion to actually saying whatever gets you through life and stops you from putting a bullet in your brain or anyone else's has got to be a good thing. So
I agree with that.
I'm very happy for religion to work if it works for people. It's just not something I'm into. But spirituality is a different thing. It's part of that. It's connected to that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be religion. And my spirituality in a lot of ways has come from and looks at things like John Coltrane's Love Supreme. That is his absolute declaration of finding God and being in love with religion and God, and basically trying to speak to God through the end of a saxophone. And it blows me away to listen to that. It doesn't once make me want to go to church or read anything I haven't already read or anything like that. But in those moments when I'm listening to that album, I sort of think, man, here was a guy sort of 40 years old, thanking the Lord that he'd saved himself after the troubles that he'd been through. But just musically, it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. It's one of the few albums that I can hear. Anytime you listen to it, it almost feels like the first time you're listening to it. And I feel the same about DJ Shadow, which is an instrumental hip-hop album. He's actually grabbing everything on that record is built from a record that already existed. He's just, the whole thing is cut and paste sampling. And to me, that's mind-blowing. Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks is a big one for me. I mean, I named Blog on the Tracks, and Off the Tracks come from that. I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, and I go in and out with Bob. And Blood on the Tracks is probably always the album that brings me back. I just think the writing is profound and beautiful and clever and sea levels above anyone else. But there are so many, like one of my personal favorite albums is, I'm a big fan of the albums that are made by artists that they maybe aren't the classic album that artist has done. Like, so Paul Simon, One Trick Pony is my favorite Paul Simon album. And so people would say, you know, Graceland or the Simon and Garfunkel stuff or Still Crazy After All These Years. I love all of that stuff. But One Trick Pony, which came out in 1980, and I guess because it's an album from my childhood, you know, I can remember hearing it at 4 or 5 years old and my parents being into it, and it's had that effect on me. But there, you know, I still look forward to the fact that maybe later today after this call or tomorrow I'll hear a new amazing album, and it could be a new amazing album that actually was made in the 60s. I just hadn't got to it, or it could be one that's released today. It's either, you know, really.
You know, I have this really, really weird habit, and this must be OCD or something. I don't know what it is. But I have a weird habit of when I find a really great album, I save a couple of songs and I'll revisit the album. Seriously, like 2 or 3 years later, I'll go, oh, I've never actually listened to the song.
That's amazing.
Like, surprise.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I have to hear things. I generally have to hear things as an album.
Yes, and I knew you were going to say that because most.
I like that. That's pretty cool. What my version of that is, as a reviewer and as a compulsive writer, as someone that's compelled to write, to blog every day, I feel sick inside if I haven't. I like getting outside and having exercise. I go and shoot hoops. I go for big walks. I love walking the dog. I love playing the drums. If I haven't written something every day, I feel like a little part of me is slowly curling up and regressing. So,
would you do more reading than writing?
No, I do a lot of reading, and I'm always got books on the go, but I'm a real snapshot sort of stolen moment reader, and I would like to be more indulgent with the reading. I would like to, occasionally a book will just captivate me and I'll go, okay, I'm signing off for the day. I'm dedicating an hour, but I read in little stolen moments. But what I was going to say was my version of keeping a couple of tracks spare is what I've started doing is every year now, my favorite 1 or 2 albums of the year, I make sure I don't write anything about them, because I'm so compelled to just catalogue and review things. So this year I haven't written a thing about the brand new Bob Dylan album, which I love, and I haven't written a thing about Fiona Apple's album, which I absolutely love. And there are probably 1 or 2 more that I have written about and maybe I shouldn't. Like I love the new Lydia Loveless album, and I thought about just something where I'm like, there are enough good words being shared about these albums anyway. And in some weird little way, I feel like I'm having it for myself if I haven't committed myself to actually publicly speaking about it or writing about it, you know. So mentioning them now is fine, but going on the radio and talking about them or writing, I don't want to do.
Have you ever done a review where, as time has gone on, you've gone,
changed my mind?
Actually, it wasn't. It's kind of growing on me.
Yeah, I get asked that all the time, and I never have a very good answer for it. But the best example I have now, it's not so much a particular album, but sometimes that happens with artists. They just make more sense to you as they go on. And you have to figure, you have to figure 2 things have happened. You know, basically, to cut through, you've grown up and maybe so have they. Like, that's really what it is. Well, you've just grown to accept each other in the world. My current example that I use is I was never a fan of the Lana Del Rey music. I never really got the buzz with it. Lots of people love Lana Del Rey, and I thought it was pretty average. And I wrote a couple of reviews that were quite harsh about a couple of her records, and then I ignored a couple of her records. And then she released an album last year called Norman fucking Rockwell, and I thought by the title alone, oh God, this is probably going to be awful. This is more of the same. But something about it made me want to listen to it, and I instantly fell in love with it. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is amazing. She's actually now everything that I've heard people saying about her, I can actually hear it now. I'm like, this is an extraordinary writer. These are great songs that have worked for right now. Then she's released a poetry book and a poetry album. She did a spoken word album with music, and I loved that. And so I have yet to go back and listen to the albums I didn't like. And I'm not sure if I will. You know, I should give them a listen and see. I'll tell you locally, the version of that happened is I hated Tammy Nielsen's first record. When Tammy Nielsen released an album, I fucking ripped it to bits. And I think, I can't remember, I think I just called it like the worst album of the year or whatever. And then she started putting out extraordinary music, and I wanted to be among the first to say so because I felt this was a whole new level. And so I raved about her album that came out in about 2013 or whatever. And then she came round to my house to do a podcast, which I thought was really good form because I had really,
wow, that's class.
It was really classy. And not only did she do that, she came around and she put me on the spot. I said something, I hedged around the idea of, how are we going to bring up the fact that I think your first album's shit? And she basically quoted me and said, I think someone called it the worst album of 2009 or whatever it was, and just mocked me for it. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And, and I sort of said to her, maybe I should go back and listen to it. And she was kind of like, nah, maybe you don't need to. Like, which I think is really cool. So that doesn't mean she thinks I was right. I don't think she's right. We're both very happy with the music that she's making now. And I think that's really important because one of the things that happens when you write about things that people care about, comedy, music, books, movies, is people think that because you've said something about something, that's your definitive opinion. And what I've really enjoyed with growing up and through the era of blogging is that my opinions change all the time. Like I revisit music, and I'm definitely more interested in some music with years to come. And music loses some things, some albums lose their edge for me. Right now, Prince's Sign of the Times has been re-released in a deluxe edition with like 60 bonus tracks. And I can't even get to the bonus tracks because the original album's just so fucking good. I just keep listening to Sign of the Times and going, this is every bit as good as it was when I was 11 years old. This is every bit as good as it was when I was 22 years old. This is maybe even better than 2 years ago when I was still listening to it. And I'm sure some of those bonus tracks are mind-blowing. Obviously, none of them are going to be as good as what originally got put out because otherwise they would have made it onto the record. That's the little secret trick with hidden tracks. They usually aren't as good. I feel the same way about Tom Petty's Wildflowers, which has just been re-released with all of the sessions. I
love Tom Petty.
Oh, yeah. And it was going to be his 70th birthday earlier this week, wasn't it? Just a couple of days ago. And 3 years gone. And that was obviously very sad. And, because he was still making very good music. He hadn't lost it. He was still making mostly very good music and putting on great shows. But that Wildflowers album that came out in 94 to me is just absolutely beautiful. So again, I haven't even got to I keep putting on the deluxe edition, and the album finishes and it goes to play the demo track, and I'm like, no, I'm satiated. That's beautiful. I love it. Time to listen to something else. But sometimes those sorts of albums do actually lose their edge. Sometimes, and just before we got talking today, I was listening to Pearl Jam Unplugged. Now, I fucking hate Pearl Jam, but I grew up at a time where they were really important to me for their first few albums. And then it was almost like I felt like I spotted exactly when they became uninteresting, and it was really on their third album, and a couple of tracks after that were okay, but I just completely lost interest in them. But I've always liked their second album, and here I am today listening to the Unplugged concert from the early 90s, which has only just been officially released as audio. Like, you can watch the video, but you've always been able to watch the video, but they've actually just released it as a CD or on Spotify. And I was listening to it, and it was like I was 13 again, which is cool. Music has that great power that it makes you feel not just younger, but it takes you to the place of when you first heard it. It isn't about the age. Yeah. It isn't about the age. It's about how philosophically, spiritually, and even in some weird way, geographically, it connects you to that place, which I think is why in the book of poems, there are so many poems I've written that are about music and that are also about Hawke's Bay, because that's where I grew up and that's where I fell in love with music.
I listened to Cashel Street from the Dance Exponents the other day.
Yeah.
Haven't heard that in, God, so many years. And man, I thrashed that as a kid, as a teenager. Man. And I just listened to it and I was just like, fuck, that's still good. I just loved it.
I've met Jordan a couple of times and I've interviewed him on the phone a couple of times, but earlier this year, just before the lockdown, I went out to Kapiti Coast, and because he was playing a gig out there, and I finally did a podcast with him. And I basically just spent the majority of the time talking to him about just trying to constantly bring up that first Dance Exponents record, because it's just an I mean, you know, he's written other great songs, and the Exponents put on great shows and did other good things, but that first album is, to me, just an absolute classic. And they were young kids, and it's just so vital. And some of the songs that are in the context slightly lesser known, like Know Your Own Heart, I'm just like, that's one of the best songs I've ever heard by anyone ever. That is just a perfect pop song. And so all I wanted to really do was talk to him about Prayers Be Answered non-stop, just like how do more people not know about? I mean, I know in New Zealand lots of people know about it, and some people think they're sick of the Exponents, and let me tell you, they're wrong. They're not sick of them. They just need to listen again from the start. They need to stop listening to Why Does Love Do This To Me and start listening to Know Your Own Heart.
I'll tell you my a favourite Jordan Luck story. So I was flatting in Ponsonby, and I must have been in my 20s. And I flatted with a guy called Mitch Harris, who was a very good programming radio programmer, and he's the kind of guy's friends with all sorts of people. And one day Jordan Luck turns up to the flat, and I'm like, Jordan Luck's here, Jesus! And he's like, "G'day, Mitch, how you going?" And he comes in, and so Jordan says, "Oh, we should put on some music. Do you want to go and put a CD on, Shaun?" And I was just being a bit of a smartass, and I thought, I'm going to put on one of his. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
And I put on, and it back in this day, he was still drinking. He brought in some Victoria Bitter. So I put on this album, and I thought, or the CD, and I thought, one of two things is going to happen. He's going to say, "Don't be a fucking smartass," or he's going to laugh it off and go, "That was kind of cheeky." And so anyway, to cut a long story short, we sat down at the kitchen table drinking Victoria Bitter, the two of us singing to the CD that I put on. I was like, I'm going to remember this to the day I die. I don't think we got through the whole album.
Singing to Victoria and not feeling bitter while drinking Victoria Bitter. That's perfect.
There we go.
I'll give you a quick Jordan Luck story too, because everyone in New Zealand has one,
exactly,
or should do, or knows someone who does. But my favourite is when I first met Jordan. It was in 2010. I was working on my book on song, which is 30 New Zealand songs and the stories behind them, and I wanted to write about Victoria. And so I'd done a couple of phone interviews with Jordan previously, and I was in Auckland for a weekend. It was a magical day because I'd just met Dave Dobbin, who, you know, is a childhood hero, and he had been warm and funny and friendly and a great interview and everything that you want from someone like that. And I was walking down the road feeling pretty good about myself, and I heading to Jordan Luck's house, and I messaged him and said, "Do you want me to pick anything up?" And he said, no, everything's fine. And then we got there, and he showed me his house, which at the time he had chosen because it was directly across the road from a bottle store. And so he said he bought the house without even looking inside it when he saw the location. So we went to the bottle store, bought some piss, spent the afternoon drinking, talking, great. And somewhere in the context of that, you know, he's asking me about my life and my family. And I said, well, actually, do you have children? I said, my wife's pregnant, and we're expecting, you know, a child, and you know, the baby's going to be born in a couple of months. And he was like, and he gave me wisdom that an older person that has kids has, and talks about how important that is, you know, and how much I'm going to love it. And I thought, wonderful. And I left, and I went from his house to go and meet and speak with Jan Hellriegel, which was also great and
lovely
wonderful.
Person. So, love it. Good friend. Love that girl.
Yeah, same. So a pretty incredible day. So then I go home and I get to the business of writing all these stories up for the book. And then Oscar is born, and a couple of months later, and I'm in the hospital, and it's been a magical and intense day. And at about 7 o'clock that night, I get a phone call, and I don't recognize the number. And, you know, I've shared on Facebook that we've had a kid or whatever. And I get this phone call, and I don't quite recognize the voice at first. And he says, "Is Oscar Sweetman there, please?" And I look across at this little tub in the hospital with this tiny little baby in it. And I don't know who it is on the phone. So I say, yes, he is, but he can't come to the phone right now.
Oh, I love it.
And well, you know, it was the truth. And he said, "Simon, it's Jordan Luck here. Today's the most special day of your life. I just wanted to ring and say congratulations, blah, blah. And I said, thanks so much. How are you? And he goes, never mind how I am. Just remember how you feel right now. Enjoy the rest of your day, blah, 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 and that was that. And I've told a few people that, I'll never forget that. It was just the most lovely gesture of connection, not just friendship, but connection and understanding. And so if anyone wants to bring up a story about Jordan being a fool, a drunken idiot, or having not always written good songs, it's very easy to say, this guy's a real human being who really cares about real human beings. Oh. He's allowed his foibles. They're what make us who we are.
A very kind spirit, a poet and a gentleman. Hey, we've taken up an hour, and it's been one of the most fun hours that I've had of the year. I really love what you do, and I'm looking forward to us building on our friendship. I just think you're fantastic what you do.
Well, all of that goes back to you. I mean, you've indulged me hugely here, but I'm a big fan of what you do, and I love just your connection with people. You're a very good interviewer, and I always love seeing good interviewing in action, because we don't always have it. But you listen to people, you give them heaps of space, and you react in the moment, and you happily go off script, but probably because you don't have a fucking script. And that's the best kind of interviewing, by the way. Yeah. The blank canvas is fantastic, man, unless it's your book cover. You can't have a blank canvas as a book cover. You've got to get the artist to deliver. But you are so good at just reacting in the moment, and that's what interviews are. They're conversations, and you're too good at this to ever lose that. But I've loved this experience.
Oh, thank you, my friend. That's very kind. Enjoy the rest of your weekend with your wonderful family, and I actually look forward to meeting you in person soon.
Yeah, same. Take care.
All right, mate. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.